Hello, welcome to our virtual conference. Our sponsor for this conference is Cameron University. Today's topic is the double dip of Turkey, decline of the rule of law, and the economy. I'm Wendy Lawson, Senior Moderator for today's conference. I'm an attorney in private practice in South Carolina on the East Coast of the United States. As Turkey has slipped away from the rule of law and democracy, just like many other indicators of prosperity and development, the country's economy is suffering. Nepotism, partisanship, presidential interference with the central bank, conspiracy theories about foreign plots to undermine Turkey's success, corruption, and even allegations of insider trading have led to major losses in the value of the Turkish lira. There's skyrocketing unemployment, especially among the young, substantially higher inflation rates compared to other emerging markets, and an exponential growth in the foreign deficit, despite manipulations in economic indicators. This crisis is diminishing hope among Turkish citizens for a better tomorrow. Cameron University is proud to present this academic conference on economic and financial issues in the Turkish economy. Our speakers today will discuss the economic ramifications of Erdogan's authoritarian surge in Turkey. Our goal is to endorse different viewpoints through an open dialogue of diverse perspectives on the topic. Mr. Yeşilada, are you ready?
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Thank you very much. First of all, I am grateful to Cameron University and Dr. Ali Soylu for locating me and inviting me to this conference, and of course to you, Wendy, for your great comments about Turkey. I want to explain formally how Mr. Erdogan's presidential regime and the slippage in Turkey's democratic standards brings about the economic deterioration. And as long as that regime, or at least its governing mentality, philosophy, remains in power, there is really not much economic hope for Turkey. Parenthetically, I must say, I look at economics from a broad perspective, more like as a vehicle for human development. And it saddens me to see Turkey slip in human development indicators as much as in rankings of per capita GDP. In my view, it is the collapse of institutions which at first sight to the lay watcher or reader don't appear to be related to the economic performance that has caused what I consider a collapse. In fact, we hear that from Mr. Sedat Peker. One very notorious example is Ziraat Bank, which is a state bank that's founded to help farmers, has advanced $750 million to an industrial holding company called the Demirören Group to purchase Hürriyet newspaper, which in my view is very mainstream. But Erdogan didn't like the guys, so he had one of his cronies, Mr. Demirören, purchased the newspaper, in fact, the entire media group. Mr. Sedat Peker claims Demirörens have not made a penny of interest payment on that loan. Obviously, I can't prove or disprove it, but it just shows you how deep corruption and intervention with the market economy has gone. Some of the most ridiculous projects is TOG, which is the Turkish domestic auto, which is going to cost $5 or $6 billion at the time when the world automotive market is inundated and so competitive that many are pulling out. You know, Istanbul Airport is another example where we wasted $20 billion, and now Canal Istanbul, of course, is one of them. These are projects that the private sector will not do, not because it is not capable of undertaking, but because it finds such projects incredibly unprofitable. But that simply means scarce resources, in this case, the taxpayers' money, is being dedicated to projects with a very low rate of return, almost negative rate of return, which means that more important projects or undertakings go unfunded. And what are these? In my view, Mr. Erdogan's biggest mistake is that he has overinvested into hardware. That's bridges, airports, sports arenas. Basically, education and media are not educational tools, are not tools that would foster a culture of free thinking and innovation. These are obviously very serious problems. And I think they are very strongly correlated with the fact that Turkish per capita GDP has slowed down substantially. I think Turkey is ready for better days. I think I'm not making any claims that Mr. Erdogan will go, but the mentality will change because people want change. And once we have a new philosophy of governance, Turkey will improve rapidly. But if I'm wrong and Mr. Erdogan and his mentality were to stay in power, uh, Turkey would have lost the battle forever. And I really don't see any hope for the next two generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yashalat. I appreciate your comments. I agree with you that having a stable judiciary is it's fundamental because, as you said, contracts, in order to grow an economy, you need foreign investment. And if a company outside of Turkey doesn't believe their contract will be enforced in Turkey, they're not going to invest in the company that they want to in Turkey. So even your domestic production, then you end up with the next step is you can't get the foreign investment, you can't get the money flowing. And so then the government steps in to fund, as you said, these things that should be private ventures. And private ventures won't do it because there's no money in it. So there's this revolving circle of poor decision making. So I really appreciated your comments on how the diminishing of the rule of law itself and the independence of the judges and their ability to make decisions independent of palace guidance is very core to even the economy. So what is the forecast in your mind, given the fact that Erdogan has closed so many schools and universities, very directly related in science and math? So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that as to how the next generation will not have. Is there any way to come back from that without reopening those schools?
No, I think first of all, at last count, over 8,000 academicians were either sacked for life because of, well, the pretense is Gülenism, but essentially there was a widespread purge, or they left voluntarily or were forced to leave the country. Even if these people return, we are still thousands of college professors short.
I really appreciate you joining us today. I need to move on to our next speaker. So thank you, sir. I appreciate it very much.
Bye-bye now.
Our next speaker is Dr. Eser Karakas from the University of Istanbul. He was a professor of economics at the University of Istanbul until he was purged from his position after the alleged coup attempt in 2016. Dr. Karakas, are you with us?
Yes.
Wonderful. I'm going to turn the screen over to you and we'll be happy to hear your comments.
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Soylu and University of Cameroon for this very kind invitation. I say hello to my colleagues. I thank you very much, Madam C, Lawson C. You all know the famous book written by Daron Acemoğlu and James Robinson, Why Nations Fail, begins by a very interesting story of Nogales. Sustainable growth, I think that's a kind of formula now. Sustainable growth needs technological changes. And technological changes require innovation. And innovation requires freedom of thought and expression. I think this example given in the book of Darul Acemoğlu and James Robinson related to Nogales is a very, very good example for the other parts of the world. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Caracas. One of the main quotes in that book is that you cannot force people to think and have good ideas by threatening to shoot them. In Turkey's case, is probably to imprison them. Especially think that the parallels to the Arab Spring, where Egypt has already done the things that Turkey is now doing. In other words, there's a ruling elite. All the power, all the authority was in the hands of just a few people. And then the people got tired of it. And that's how the Arab Spring came about, because everything was sort of at their expense. So how would you, given the fact that you've put together with this book, Why Nations Fail, what are your thoughts on whether or not Turkey will have some sort of Ottoman Spring?
Thank you very much. I think the term Arab Spring is not very, very correct, because the real Arab Spring began in Turkey in 2002. I think that's my humble opinion. And
I defer to your humble opinion, because I promise you my humble opinion is probably incorrect.
I think the birth of this concept of spring in the Middle East has its sources in the United States of America. General Motors was selling its items to the government. Government was the client, was even the only client. It was the monopson in the country of American products. And then something has changed. Now Apple symbolizes the new American era, the new American industry. But the main change is that now, from client state to client citizen, American industry wants to sell its items not only to Mubarak or to Sisi, to the governors. They want to sell their items to the peasantry of Egypt. So they need a purchasing power increase for the peasantry. So they need democracy and the rule of law, which will generate economic growth in the Middle East. I think that's the same logic. Without rule of law in Middle East, in Egypt or in Turkey, there will never be, without property rights, there will be no investments. Without investment, there will be no growth. Without growth, there will be no purchasing power increase, which will make people able to buy the mobile phones of Apple. I think that's a little bit the same story. But I think the Western world had made a semantic error. What I mean by semantic error, a vocabulary error, because for the Western culture, democracy and the rule of law are the same thing. When you are talking about the country in which there is a rule of democracy, it means there is also a rule of law. But in Middle East, that's not the case. That's not
okay. I can understand.
Look at Turkey today. We are going to the polls every 4 years. So there is a kind of democracy.
Correct.
There is a full decline of rule of law.
I understand. That's very interesting. And of course, that gives me a lot to think about. But then we don't have time for me to catch up my brain to ask the question that needs to be asked in order for you to explain it to me.
Like a second intervention, but I thank you very much for your attention.
That's fine. I really appreciate Dr. Caracas for being with us today. Move on to our next speaker, Dr. Burak Arzova. He earned a PhD from Marmara University in Istanbul, and he is currently a professor in the Department of Business Administration there, teaching accounting and finance. Well, I'm going to turn the screen over to you, let you give your talks, and then hopefully we'll have some comments, questions afterwards. Okay?
Okay. And I want to first begin with the Turkey's growth. It was an amazing growth for the OECD countries. We were the second country who were the biggest growth in the first quarter of 2020. It's compared to year to year. And the Turkish economy had a strong investment performance in the last 3 quarters. When we look at the production in Turkey, it's really seen that the industrial production is very high for the first quarter GDP. It was 11.7%. Turkey's main problem is the sustainability in the growth of the country. But this growth in the quarter one of 2021 is not correlated with the labor force indicators. Labor force indicators, when we look at the labor force indicators, we are far from to explain the unemployment rate in Turkey, because there is a ban of letting the people out of work. Because of this, we are looking to the composite measure of labor, which includes the underemployment and potential labor force also. And the value of Turkish lira also is very important. It's undervalued Turkish lira and against US dollars and the euro, and it helps also to increase the demand to Turkish products. And the changing situations of sectors also is very influential in Turkey. The manufacturing is better than the services sector, and it will continue, I think, approximately maybe more than 1 or 2 years. Thank you very much for inviting me again to this conference.
Thank you, Dr. Arzova. I appreciate it. You're expecting then the unemployment situation to improve post-pandemic then?
Yes, but improve in a negative way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I really appreciate you joining us, Dr. Arzova. Dr. Ghoshal obtained both an MA and a PhD in economics from the University of Paris. Dr. Ghoshal, I probably mispronounced your name and every university that you went to, and I am very sorry about that. My Turkish is nominal at best, and so I appreciate that those who are with us who speak Turkish probably at least hopefully understood what I was trying to say. So I'm going to turn the screen over to you and let you give us your talk.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to this conference. For this reason, let me continue in Turkish.
Please.
But anyway, the question you are curious to know how the Turkish labor market behaved last year. Very, very amazing. In particular, the standard unemployment rate is not anymore a good indicator of the unemployment, because, as Burak Arzova tried to explain, a lot of people left the labor market. A lot of people who lost their jobs left the labor market because they don't think that they can find any job under the conditions. For this reason, the potential, let's say, the potential unemployed people are waiting on the borders of the Turkish labor market. And in the last 2 months, just in March and April, the last statistics, labor market statistics, on Turkey, which have been published, show clearly that this potential unemployed people are now started to look for jobs. So the employment is increasing, but in the same time, the unemployment rates also are increasing because the labor force is increasing more rapidly than the employment increase. So this is the reason why I agree with Burak Arzova. This is why in Turkey, in the next in coming months and even in coming year, we can observe a rise in the unemployment rate, while the growth could be, the GDP growth could be positive. Thank you very much.
Well, Dr. Kourakis would like to give some input. So please, sir.
Thank you very much again. I have two questions to Seyfettin. Those questions are not for a debate. Those are the questions that I don't know the answers. The first one is the following. We have international comparison tables published by many organizations about the per capita income, rule of law index, about whatever you imagine, concerning about 200 countries in the world, member of United Nations. As a proxy, I can say that Turkey is always placed somewhere in the middle. For example, in the United Nations Development Program, concerning the Human Development Index, we are a little bit better. In the Rule of Law Index, we are not so good. But there is one table, that's the inflation rate international comparison table, that Turkey is among the 10 worst countries in the world. Do you know the answer of this? Why the inflation rate in Turkey is so high? And despite the fact that our public finance data is not so bad. The public debt ratio is the best in Europe. Our budget deficit is a very good budget deficit ratio in Europe. But in inflation tables, we are among the 10 worst countries of the world. Like the countries that I could never imagine to go there, except Argentina and Venezuela. How do you explain why there's this negative story in inflation rates?
And
Yes,
Dr. Gosel, please feel, if you'd like to respond in Turkish, that's fine too.
I have another question, but just after the answer of Seyfettin.
I don't know if I have an answer, but anyway, just I would like to point out that this was not all the time the case. Historically, in Turkey, we had periods of low inflation. For example, from 1923 up to Second World War, this was the case. After the World War, until the 1954-55, this was again the case. I mean, low inflation, stable and low inflation. This was again the case in 1960s up to 1973, 1974.
And then?
So when the inflation increased, those are the periods where, of course, the macroeconomic imbalances rise. I don't want to repeat the different periods, but coming back into second half of 1970s, we know that once inflation went up to 2 digits and even close to 100%, and this inflation persisted during more than 30 years. we can explain. We have no time to explain this. Many things happened, and finally, Turkey could not success to come over the inflation, high inflation. But again, let me remember that, for example, in 1954-55, the inflation increased up to 20% even under the rule of Democrat Party. But in 1960, a program, Kemal Kurdaş, etc., there was no IMF anyway at this time, planning, it was possible to get down and stabilize the inflation around 4 or 5%. This is acceptable for a developing country or underdeveloped country, as you mean. Anyway, the last success in after this 30 years of high inflation happened in 2000s, in particular during the period after 2002, you know, new institutional setup, independence of policy independence for the central bank, and so on. And finally, the inflation has been decreased to around 6%, something like that. And then again, I think mistakes, not only in monetary policy, but also the fierce competition, electoral competition, and how to say, ambitions for changing the political system, the ambitions of Mr. Erdogan, etc., we can explain date by date, finally made the inflation rather increasing. And in particular, you know, the two-digit inflation, we experienced it in the last 2 years, and now it is just close to 17%. And we don't know, even though if there is a change in power, if there is a change of government within the coming 2 years, I am not sure how the new power, new executive will be able to get down this inflation, to get it down at least to the targeted inflation, which is, as you know, 5%. This is a big question. Once again, I have no answer to this. We can discuss it, of course, but I think this is not a fatality. In English, we can say fatality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Caracas, go ahead with your second question, and then we'll have Dr. Soylu give his
about
remarks.
the unemployment calculation in Turkey. In agricultural sector, our yearly output is about 70 billion euros. 70 billion euros, our agricultural output every year. That's exactly equal to the French agricultural output, 70 billion euros. Turkey and France, we are producing the same output. But France is producing this with 600,000 people, employed people, 600,000 employed people. And Turkey is doing this with more than 5 million people, more in agricultural sectors. Those who are said to be employed. Now, I know that in French agricultural output, there are some goods like cognac, a very high quality red wine with a very high value added. So this French output of 70 billion euros is partly made of cognac and French red wine, but it does not explain the story. Now, can I say this very frankly, as a professor, that we have at least 3 million more people who can be declared unemployed in the agricultural employments. At least 3 million. compared to France, there is no such a technology gap in agriculture between, yes, there is some gap, but the agricultural technology or agricultural chemical that they use is almost the same. So I think that we have to add at least 3 million more people to the unemployment in Turkey that will come potentially in the agriculture. Am I right or wrong, Seyfi? You are the master of the story.
You are absolutely right.
Yay!
So
It's
this
always
is, of
good to be
course,
right.
one of the historical and structural problem of Turkish economy, the low productivity in agriculture.
Yes.
But again, you are aware of it. We call, you know, in the economic literature, economic history literature, and even growth literature, the past dependency concept. We inherited in the Turkish Republic in 1923 from Ottoman Empire, the legacy was extremely disappointing. In 1923, there was the part of agricultural employment in total employment was 80%. And this continued until 1950. In 1950, there was still 80% of employed people working in agricultural sector. So France, because this was the comparison country, already in even 18th century, but definitely 19th century, had successfully made the transformation of agriculture, and step by step the productivity, in particular, of course, after 1950, the productivity went up in other countries, in developed countries, advanced countries, but not, unfortunately, in Turkey. Of course, there was a productivity growth. We are now, the agricultural employment, the part of agricultural employment is still 17%. 17% is, again, extremely high. This shows how the labor productivity is so low in agriculture. Of course, we have no time to discuss now the structural of Turkish agriculture, but don't forget that just this is family producers with rather low, the average of surfaces, cultivated surfaces for each family.
8 hectares. 8 hectares as an average.
Is quite limited. Of course, technology, there is, as I mentioned, there is a quite large technological gap. This is not only a question of machinery, agriculture equipment, but also, you know, the new technologies in agriculture. The irrigation also is another problem. It is not large, but Turkish governments, successive Turkish governments, could not could not make a structural reform in agriculture for electoral reasons, for populist policies, and so on. Anyway, this is, of course, one of the major structural problems for Turkish economy. If we can not have in the coming years a quite rapid productivity, labor productivity increase, we cannot also, of course, catch not with United States or with developed European countries, but even though with, I don't know, even Vietnam, with Vietnam, yes, with China, probably.
So the unemployment is extremely underestimated in Turkey, at least by 3 million people. Yes,
of course.
Thank you very much.
I really appreciate the back and forth that we're having here. This is very educational for me, and I'm sure for our audience as well. Having such experts be able to voice their opinions. I do want to bring in Dr. Zoilu so that he can give his talks, and then maybe we can have another roundtable discussion about what he has to say, if that's all right with everyone. Dr. Zoilu, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. I can hear you very well. So if you'll go ahead and give us your thoughts, and then we'll come back.
Thank you very much being moderator for this conference. I'd like to thank all participants, our distinguished speakers. This event would not take place without their contribution. Thank you very much to all. In order to talk about economy, to think about economy in general, we need to be aware of the rule of law, freedom, innovation, technology. So Turkish economy was in a position to compete in the global environment until 2013. Macro and microeconomic indicators showed that the Turkish economy was progressing in a positive direction. While unemployment rates, inflation, and interest rates were falling, Turkish currency was maintaining its value against the foreign exchange. So Turkey has become an attractive and reliable country for international financial institutions and foreign investors. So hot money was entering the country and exports were increasing. In the first 10 years of Erdogan's administration, there have been important developments, although not enough, in terms of freedom and human rights. However, Erdogan and his government used the increasing public support due to this positive development to implement their hidden agenda. There are several obstacles, challenges Turkish economy is experiencing. There are many, we may add more to the list. What happened at the beginning, it was doing good. And I personally was proud of my country that the economy was in a good direction, in the right way. Unemployment rate, interest rate, inflation rate, all these macro and microeconomic indicators were going down in a positive way, or going up in some others, of course, but his administration started to clash with the individuals and groups that he has long opposed. He started to clash with the army in 2007 and 2008, and especially with the Kurds and the Gulen movement in 2013 and after. There are political discussion. I'm not going into that discussions, who is right, who is wrong, but they are, when I say they, Erdogan government are the one responsible for the Turkish economy. So they are the one get support from people from public. People vote for them, give them right to manage the country in the right way, not for their own interest. As the support for Erdogan and his party increased, he fought harder, start fighting against his opponents, and began to destroy the accomplishment by the Cumhuriyet, we call republic. One by one, he started to implement his own agenda. He doesn't abide the existing law, nor does he abide the law he created by himself, by his administration. Or he started to establish a media system under his command that would make propaganda for the continuance of his power by use the state resources. He offered journalists and television broadcasters high salaries and opportunities that they could not even imagine in their lives. He minimized criticism by inviting opponents from the media and politics to his party. Erdogan's evolution from a democratic leadership that controls everything, the reason why Turkish economy has gone upside down. So at the beginning, as I mentioned earlier, he was showing a democratic leadership, cooperating with other groups, combining together to help Turkish economy to grow. However, later on, his evolution from democratic leadership to autocratic leadership, he wanted to control everything in just the way he wants. He said, my way is the highway. So this is the way I manage the country. I manage the country as a company, and I am the CEO of the country. The way I want, I will manage. So this is not democratic. This is not fair. This is not what people let him to do. So that's why Turkish economy has gone upside down. To me, this is the way I see from outside. I have been in US for 25 years and never noticed the president is interested in a park where the park will be established, or a highway, or a bridge. US president do not deal with these things. So the presidential position is in the highest level and must be respectful position for everybody. Turkey's economic competitiveness has been weakened by Erdogan's fight with his opponent inside, his avoidance of positive diplomacy abroad, his inability to transform and compete in agriculture, as mentioned by earlier speakers. His frequent replacement of autonomous central bank presidents 3-4 times last couple of years, and most importantly, his destruction of quality human resources, which has been the output of many years. For an individual to be productive in economy, we need about like 20-25 years to educate him, to make them ready. And what happened in last couple of years, maybe 5-6 years, Erdogan came up with a call them in the US executive orders, presidential orders, to terminate or fire more than 200,000 people for no reason, from employment, from the government, from the government positions. So the damage, imagine the damage, the total damage to economy. People spent 20-25 years for education to be ready to work in the economy, and also have 5, 10, 20, maybe 30 years of experience. Add that on the top of that and calculate the damage has been done to Turkish economy by Erdogan administration. It was mentioned about the rule of law, the stability of the environment. Of course, we have to have a stability, political stability, economic stability to attract the foreign investors. Starting from 2013, the foreign direct investments amount dramatically went down. In addition to this, the transition from the democratic parliamentary system to the presidential system, Erdogan's intervention in the central bank's monetary policy, interest rates, and the fight against inflation caused the dollarization economy in the country. Short and the long-term financing problems, and the Turkish lira to lose value against the foreign currency. So in addition to problems arising from the pandemic, negatively affected the Turkish economy, just as it has affected these of other countries. So in order for the Turkish economy to develop, Erdogan administration should immediately return to an environment that is democratic, fair, respectful to the law and human rights, and that guarantees property and commercial rights. So Turkey has to do this with or without Erdogan administration. I am going to share gross domestic product over the years. It was about 9,500 or near to 10,000 in 2008 and 10, and it increased up to 2013 about $12,000 and went down. What happened after Erdogan start fighting with the people like Gülen movement, Kurds, other group of opponents, oppositions with the opposition parties, and using a disrespectful language, dividing the country exactly in the middle. Decision makers, administrative people didn't make good or right decision to lead, to direct the country. So that's why the gross domestic product went down dramatically from about $13,000 per capita down to 8,500. So the total gross domestic product of Turkey is about $720 billion. So which is still okay. It makes Turkey, place Turkey in the first 20 countries in the world. However, according to the capacity of Turkey, the resources, human resources, population, and other infrastructure, Turkey must be in a better place. The target was about being in the first 10. That was the initial target for Erdogan's administration. And the export amount per year was to hit the $500 billion. But now we are still under $200 billion. And from 17th in the developed countries, now we went down to 20th. So this shows that the Erdogan administration is not able to fix the problem. Our distinguished speakers earlier mentioned about the rule of law, the stability, get back to normal for Turkish economy.
Cameron University. So we also specifically thank them for sponsoring today's program. You hit on a couple of the things that I was thinking about when I was talking about the unemployment situation and that sort of thing, is that you have this mass of people who are unemployed, underemployed, unable to, they're either on the government, roles because they're unemployed and they're unemployable, or you have this drain on the economy. And so I'm wondering, how do we get back to the upswing? So you showed, 2013, everything started to go down. How do we get to the upswing without some sort of governmental change?
Well, thank you very much for your question. That's an important question. We are not in a position to discover something new. So we have to look at the world, the contemporary world they are doing. There are some fundamental principles we have to follow. For the liberal capitalistic economy, for example, since Adam Smith, we have to respect the right of the property and let people, entrepreneurs, investors, we have to let them to do what they want to do. So if the economy is a liberal capitalistic economy, you cannot shut down businesses, schools, universities, or you cannot get people's properties. You have to be clear. You have to give confidence to the outside people. You have to attract foreign investors to the country to bring the money. As you mentioned earlier, in order for an economy to grow, in order to eliminate unemployment or reduce the unemployment rate, you have to have something coming from outside, especially a country like Turkey. And this can be with the consistency in law. A country should not change the rules overnight. The decision makers wake up in the morning and change the law and the rule. So you cannot give confidence to both internal and external people to contribute to the economy. So our people are running out, taking their money, selling their businesses, and running out for a better environment. Instead, we have to attract people to come in, but they are running out. So there is a big problem. Inflow capital, inflow investment, foreign investment is less than outflow. So more is going out than coming in. So political stability, rule of law, providing trust, people can trust the government. Decision makers must not fight with their own people. They have to provide infrastructure, stable environment, so people will help the economy to grow, to contribute to the economy. We have to bring the peace to the country. People believe each other. People believe the government. They can predict what will happen in the future in the next 5 years, 10 years. However, we don't have this. Unfortunately, we don't have this in Turkey now. So this is shame on us that we cannot provide a stable environment for everybody to help to contribute our economy. And everybody suffer. Our income is going down. The quality of life is going down. The power of purchase is going down. Inflation up, interest rate up. It's shame. I mean, we were proud of our country 10 years ago. And I want to go back to that point and be proud of my country again.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. Dr. Gusel, do you have any comments for Dr. Soylu or any questions?
No, thanks. Thanks very much. This was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. How about you, Dr. Caracas?
I thank you very much. Really.
Okay, well, then we're going to close out our conference. I really thank each of you for being a part of us today. I especially want to thank Cameron University for sponsoring the virtual conference. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel to see both prior and future conferences on Turkey. And please help us by leaving feedback and comments on this YouTube page as well. And I really appreciate everyone attending and thank you for watching.
Wendy, I'd like to thank Dr. Caracas and Dr. Gusel for participation and accepting my invitation for this conference. I appreciate, I know them like for years, not personal, I mean like face to face, but I know them from media, from TVs, from their books. But this was the first time we see each other. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, and hope we can do more activities, events in the near future. Thank you very much, both of you and other who are not now here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks everyone. Gule.
Thank you to you
Thank
too
you very much
for your time, Wendy. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.